When it comes down to it, common people, or as the Bible calls them, worldly people, are obsessed with one thing, and that's control. I'll already explain that. How do they express this obsession with control? By seeking power. Just think about it. If you have power, you can achieve results. But just because you have the ability to achieve a result doesn't mean that people are going to accept those results. For example, let's say you can sing because you have an ability to sing. Let's say you can sing you have a very beautiful voice. Others may not like your voice just because it's you, just because they can't control what you're singing. So they may try to do whatever they can to resist you expressing your singing talent. But let's say now that you have YouTube on which you post your videos of you singing. Now you reach an audience. So now YouTube empowers you to generate an audience. Now you have a platform. What people now can do if they want to go against your outcome, which is that you have a platform, is that they can send trolls to you or try to discredit you. It all comes down to whose will stand. That's the whole fight amongst worldly people. Whose will stand. All those formalities concerning respect and politeness are all about power. It's all about who has the right to act out at the expense of someone else. That's what it's all about. If you have a household, and in that household, the father is the one with the income, the rest depends on his income for food and shelter, then he has the ability to demand things based upon the needs people have for him. If the children are grown and they have their own place, the children can just move away and it's over with this ability to make them do what he wants. Why? Because they don't need him anymore. So power in worldly relationships comes down to whose will stand at the expense of someone else. And because human beings are not immortal at this point in time, and because human beings, even if they would be immortal, we are not, but even if we would be immortal, we're not, we're not invulnerable, we are vulnerable creatures. That's why the relationships tend to change. Because, again, the father will not always be the one providing. The children grow up and they move out, they have their own place. And in their own place, where they rent an apartment or a house, they can exercise their will because they're paying the rent over there. So relationships tend to change. Roles that are assigned to you tend to change. In society, everyone wants to benefit from the release of negativity, in a sense that the release of negativity produces calm, it produces relief, and everyone wants to be part of that relief. Nobody wants to be part of the one who's dumped upon. Nobody wants to be the one that's left out. So, because human beings are vulnerable creatures and we're also mortal, we know that we can't fight everyone all the time. That's why we collide with one another in groups and we submit onto a structure of violence that we call society, in the hope that each one of us gets the best of the cake. And who determines who gets what of the cake? Those that have the power and the permission by the community to harm others. The community doesn't allow everyone to harm each other. Only a certain group of people who are elected by the community, they are the ones that are permitted to harm others, on behalf of the community, of course. This obsession with power, you see it in daily life. You see it in marriages, you see it in friendships, you see it in parent-child relationships, you see it on the workplace, you see it in churches, you see it everywhere, especially see it in the business world. People are terrified of not being able to vindicate their will. They can't vindicate their will on their own, so they collide with others who think the same like them, so that collectively they can achieve their will together. This is the type of unity the world has. And it's fear-based. It's all based upon them being the lost. Nobody wants to be the lost. Everyone wants to be number one or close to number one. Everyone wants to have relevance, because when you have relevance, people will consider you. Think of it like this. If you have a big farm and you have a gang of people that protect that farm, then you are relevant to the local economy. Why? Because people need food. People need agricultural products to have parties or to have meetings with one another. So you are relevant based on what you have, because you are an asset to the community. If you are just a loner with a hut in a tree, then what's your relevance to the community? Almost zero. So when it comes down to whose will be permitted or tolerated by the community, would they rather have the will of someone with a large plot of land and a gang to protect the land? Because he has a gang that protects his land, nobody can just come and take his land from him. Because they know if they try to take the land away from him, they have repercussions. The gang will come after them. So would they rather consider the will of such an individual or the will of some loner with a hut somewhere in a tree? Well, with a treehouse, I mean. In American English, call it a treehouse. The answer is obvious. The loner with a treehouse doesn't have economic relevance to the community. So the one with economic relevance, he will be considered. It can be that, let's say, for example, that people want to build a bridge across a river. But now, the guy with a large plot of land doesn't want that bridge. Why? Because the moment the bridge is there, people from the other side of the river can also come to that side of the land, of the region. And if that happens, the guy with a large plot of land will lose its relevance. Why? Because people at the other side of the river, they have large plots of farmland and their production is far higher. So people on the east, let's say that you have people on the east side of the river that are dependent on the large plot of land of this rich farmer. He knows that at the other side of the river there are small groups owning large plots of farmland and the production is far higher than his. The moment a bridge is built between the east side and the west side, most of the people of the east side will realize, hold on a minute, why are we putting up with the demands of this guy with this gang that owns a large plot of land? At the other side of the river, we can get things far cheaper, sometimes even for free. So, and then you have people on the east side who collide with this rich farmer. They also want to keep their benefits because their will is also relevant because they're associated with that rich farmer. So they all want to retain their benefits. And those benefits can only be retained as long as the community needs them, as long as they are economically relevant. So, the moment more options come, those that held the cards will lose their strength on the community. So now the rich farmer says, no, we are not going to build that bridge. But the guy realized, hold on a minute, if I send my gang to assault people building the bridge, people will turn on me, it will be over. So he came with a plan. He came with a plan to convince the people that those people at the other side of the river, they are barbaric and they are violent and that the community will be far better off without them. And through false flag attacks, they convinced the people that indeed we don't need a bridge between this side of the river and on the side of the river. What happened now is that this rich landlord built a castle for quote-unquote protection, so that any time an attack would come, the people could flee to the castle. And the people really believed that this castle was needed, even though it was all a hoax. People at the other side of the river looked at the situation and thought, huh? That rich guy over there keeps most of the crops to himself. There are parts of the population over there that's starving. Now he has built this gigantic structure, this castle, for the protection of the people. What protection? He just wants to control the people. But the people by now, because they're so invested emotionally in the community, they just don't want to hear it. They don't want to see it. So anyone now who questions the narrative becomes the target. Now the rich landowner, who is now also a castle lord, together with his buddies, they have a lot of power. Not power they have naturally, by their own physical strength, nor by their spiritual capacity, but power that the people assign to them by enabling their exploitation. So now the population complies with their exploitation. That's what empowers them. That's the social power that they have now. Okay? Not military power, but social power. Social power is far more effective than military power. Military power is very limited, and military power is exhausted quickly, and military power can backfire easily. Social power is what lasts often for generations, even if the one that held the social power is already deceased. Now, in the parable I give unto you, the people at the other side of the river, on the west side, think, this is crazy. We don't want to deal with those people. How could they tolerate this man, who's just a human being, and his sons controlling that large plot of land, even though as human beings they don't have the physical strength to manage all the land. So now the community manages the land on their behalf, even though the community doesn't benefit of the regulation. What crazy thing is this? But everyone continues with this cycle because they all hope to benefit from the pie. Effectively speaking, there's a pie, there's delicious, everyone wants to eat a part of the pie. But the one that owns the large plot of land, who's now the castle lord, owns the pie, quote unquote. He doesn't really own it, but he owns the pie according to the community, and he decides who gets a piece of the cake. And everyone is fighting to get a piece of the cake. Instead of seeing the bigger picture, that is all a hoax. And that's how the world is. That's what society is. It's a hoax that people keep alive in the hope to get a piece of the pie. And what's the piece of the pie? To have your will vindicated. To have people have to deal with your will. To have people not resist your will. To have every challenge against your will trampled upon. That's what common people are after. Now, there are common people that really aren't into power and all of that. They just want the best for humanity. You have those people are amongst worldly people, but they are rare. When it comes down to it, common people, they join groups to protect their power, their ability to exercise their will at someone else's expense. They all want a big piece of the pie, and they all want someone else as less piece of the pie so that they can have advantage over them. Okay, in the parable I give unto you, only had one rich farmer. Replace that one rich farmer with 10 rich farmers, or let's say 20 rich farmers. Now you have 20 castles, and you have some families that assist those 20 castle lords, and now they have a large territory the size of France, and they call it the Kingdom of France. That's how it went in the Middle Ages. And now you have a population of around maybe 10 million people that tolerate those 20 castle lords to govern them. And those 20 castle lords have an overlord called the King of France, but that's his title. Most of the time his name is Louis, or Louis as you pronounce in French, and that's how the Kingdom of France operated. It was a big hoax that was kept alive because everyone in that community, that means the common people, wanted a piece of the pie, instead of realizing that the pie itself was a construct at their expense. Why am I telling you this? You need to understand what's going on when the pagan rulers talk about elections. When it comes about elections, whether it's elections for the presidency of the United States or elections for some municipality somewhere in Germany, everywhere there are political elections all about who gets what. Who has the right to will whatever they will and nobody else has the right to say anything against them. This was all about. And in the world, minorities know that when elections come, they need to make plain, this is what we want, and we want a part of the pie. Because in the world, it works like this. If you don't campaign for your part of the pie, you often don't get a piece of it. When you don't get a piece of the pie, others do, and others will not share their piece of the pie with you. They will use their piece of the pie to control you. That's how it goes in the world. Now, I'm not saying that elections are legit. I'm not here to advocate that. What I'm saying is, during election time, people know we need to stand for our interests. And in the world, it works. In the world, it happens that minorities get what they want from the pagan rulers, and the pagan rulers have to agree with them. Why? Because as human groups, they exercise their collective power. And the pagan rulers of this world, they need to they need to drain the human population of their power. But if they keep exploiting people mercilessly, faults come to revolt and it will be over. So from time to time, when the resistance is fierce, they will cave in a bit to the people. And you have minorities that were discriminated against, and they got what they wanted by exercising their collective power, their collective ability. Because their power was this: if we don't get our piece of the pie, bad stuff are going to happen. And the community, the majority knows that, oh there, if those people don't get what they want, bad stuff going to happen. You know what? We don't want bad stuff to happen. We're going to cave in. We're going to give them a little bit of compensation. They get a little bit of the pie. I'm telling you how things go in the world. In the world, if you are a minority, you better organize yourself and make plain what your interests are, and make plain that you don't negotiate, that you have interests that needs to be met. You want tangibles, and if the community doesn't offer tangibles, there are going to be repercussions. That's how it goes in the world. And it works. That's why you have ethnicities that died out because they were exploited and starved to death by the majority, and then you have minorities that are still around after centuries, and they are thriving and prospering. Why? Because they know how the world works. Believers, on the other hand, we are not of the world, but we are in the world. So we need to know how the world operates because we're in the world. And we need to use the world in our advantage instead of serving the world. We don't serve the world, we serve Christ. We serve Christ and we use the world in our service to Christ. That's what we do. The world uses you, whether you're a believer or unbeliever, to serve the beast at your expense. It's either you're serving Christ or you're serving the beast at your own expense. Now, believers serve Christ and we use the world in line with Christ. That's why as believers, we need to be firm also. We don't seek a part of the pie, which is an illusion. We don't need a pie. We have the power that comes from Christ and we ought to walk in it. What happens throughout history is that Satan sought to disarm believers. Remember what I said about the pie. You need to have economic relevance to exercise your will over others at someone else at their expense. If someone has economic assets or financial assets, then they can avoid your will. If you want to disarm them, take away the financial assets, take away the economic assets, take away the land, take away their houses, take away their perception to realize that they have options. When you disarm them, you can exploit them and even kill them far easily, far more than you would if they had their knowledge and they were armed with their assets. Wherever you go in history, when you do your research, that's what you'll find. Anytime a genocide is about to occur, the population as targeted will be disarmed. Whether literally their arms or guns will be taken away, or they will be disarmed financially. They do it so that when the group is killed, they can't resist, they don't have any options anymore. Often cultural disarmament happens, in which a target group is taught that they are nothing without some, without some foreign power. Then people comply with their own demise because they think that's the only way. Just realize, anytime the enemy wants to exploit you or drain you, he will disarm you. Christ arms us with the truth. He arms us with his word. We ought to walk in it. That's it for now. Agree with Christ and be at peace.